What came first, the chicken or the egg? Okay, so perhaps we won't go into that in this episode, but just as there's an undeniable link in that question, so also is there in our topic today: customer service versus employee experience. Which should you prioritize? Research shows us that companies with great customer experience have employees that are 1.5 times more engaged. And if you have highly engaged employees, you're likely to be outperforming your competitors by 147%. So, where should you invest your energy? Today, I'm joined by Will Gibson, who describes himself as a telecoms retail aficionado and straight talker. So, who better to delve into this topic with than Will? So, let's get started. Will, welcome to In Good Company. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a delight to have you here. So, thank you for giving us your time. So that our audience can get to know you a little bit better, why don't you tell us about yourself in 60 seconds?
60 seconds. Wow, that's challenging. Okay, I'm a career retailer. The last 2 decades have been in the telecom industry. And I'm a father, a husband, a sports fan, Newcastle United. And I'm also a big style sci-fi enthusiast. And so much so, I actually wrote and published my first science fiction novel last year, which was really exciting.
Oh,
And
well.
second coming out soon. So that's my kind of side job away from all of the other things.
Oh, amazing. I'd be keen to see that. So you'll have to send me a copy. So you've written a blog about poor customer service experiences and how this can be linked to the challenges faced by new employees. In fact, you've called your blog "How New Employees Are Killing the Experience," and we'll put a link to that in the description. So why don't you briefly tell us what that's about and what inspired you to write this?
Sure. I think my frustration in the retail industry and in my own industry, in telecoms retail,
Hmm.
but actually it was a personal experience that made me write this. I've long been aware that this has been a challenge for many retail companies, particularly in the what I'll call the post-COVID years, because that
Right.
drove a lot of staff turnover. And as a result, a lot of retailers have been scrambling to re-employ, and they haven't done a particularly great job of doing so, I might say. So that is my inspiration behind it, very much based around my own experiences as a shopper and as a consumer as well.
And are you able to sort of share any examples at this point that? So I mean, because I'm thinking about myself. Like I'm sure there's been, and our listeners and an audience will I'm sure will have had loads of examples of being a customer who's faced with either new or undertrained staff members.
Mm.
Of course, everyone is new at some point, so there's got to be some allowances for that. But what would you say, and perhaps provide an example, is the difference between a good and bad experience with a new customer service advisor? What are some of the specific challenges around it?
Yeah, often I find that if the new employee is encouraged, empowered to be themselves, to
Mm,
state the fact that they are new, and then you can cut these people sometimes a bit of slack. But often, because they're not very well trained about the human aspects of things, and particularly customers who might have a very specific use case. In my blog, I was talking about a visit to a well known electronics retailer here in the UK. I
mm,
just bought a new desktop PC for the first time in 11, 12 years. And I've got a couple of monitors here at home and in my home office. And I only had one cable. I needed the other cable, which is a different type of cable. I've got millions of the HDMI types, none of this display port something.
yep.
So I rushed down to this well known electronics retailer, and I'm doing the spin around the store, which again, nobody noticed or tried to approach me. They just left me to it, trying to find where the cables were. Found where the cables were, couldn't find what I needed. Approached lovely young lady,
Mm.
but she had no clue A, what I was talking about, or B, how to help me find somebody who could help with what I was talking
Mm.
about. And then when they did, the handover was little more than, Dave, can you come over here and help this guy? and
Yeah, right.
it was pretty bad. So I talk about it a lot more in the blog. So
Yeah.
that was one of the challenges that I faced for sure.
And it's yeah, having been in that position of working in retail, and I highly expected it was for the same retailer. It's the yeah, I think in some cases, yes, there's the sort of personal aspect, the human to human connection. In some ways, is yes, not necessarily one that's given through formal training, but in some cases can come either naturally or be in the sphere of your colleagues who you might surround yourself in. So if that's lacking, then yes, that's definitely that pickup that would be needed.
Mm.
And it's and so that I guess is a good an example of the bad customer service. So what would in that, let's use that as your example, and what would you like to have seen different apart from some of the obvious things? What could be done to improve that in the time that you were there?
So, I mean, she should have been taught to see that I was a particular type of customer, a driver customer. I know what I want, and I just want that, and I'm very motivated and was in a hurry to get it. So I think if she had been taught that from the get go, she could have A, recognized that,
Mm,
and then B, um, been very open about the fact that she was new and she wasn't aware of what I needed, but then helped me find somebody and then made the introduction, briefly explained the challenge that I had already said to her so that I don't have to repeat myself.
mm,
It's like almost if you've got two friends from different friend groups and you're at a party and they're there and you know both of these people well, and you start talking to one and another comes over. Well, what do you do? Do you just do nothing and talk to the other one the same, or do you introduce them?
mm,
And that's what I wanted this young lady to do is say, Dave, can you come and help me here? I'm dealing with a customer. He's in a real hurry. He's trying to find a DisplayPort cable. I can't see them. What do you suggest we do?
mm,
Just something as simple as that would have transformed the experience and taken that frustration away from me of
mm.
I couldn't find what I wanted, store wasn't particularly very well signed, and turned it into a positive experience. And my whole demeanor may change and open up, and I might end up buying a lot more than I intended on
Mm.
buying when I first went in.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so much about because and yeah, you would more likely be a returning customer, not just and as you say, buy more there, but also would return. Um, and it's amazing how seemingly even a quick interaction, or what sounds like you've described as a quick interaction, can immediately have that an effect because it could be that. And I wonder, are we kind of geared to have that same? Are we sort of programmed to have that same kind of walls up, as it were, if the experience was instantly different from as soon as you walked in? Is it possible to create that good experience from the second you walk through the door? And
Oh,
what?
absolutely. Absolutely it is. And this is where I just find the training in lots of different retail verticals, but across retail as a whole,
Mm,
is very sorely lacking. Training people on the types of customers that are coming into your store. And that will be different if you are a craft retailer or an electronics retailer or a telecoms retailer like I
mm,
am. It can be very different, but you can absolutely just use a few very subtle techniques just to make someone's day a little bit better.
mm,
And I find that training across the retail sector is little more than okay, it's day one. Um, Here's Dave. Sorry if I'm calling all retail employees Dave, by the way, nothing against Dave. We've got a lot of good friends who are called Dave. But here's Dave. Go follow him around for a bit. And then if you're lucky, you might get an hour in the afternoon when the store goes quiet where they say, right, let's get you your logins and here's how you use the till system.
mm,
And it should be just much more than that. And
mm,
I think the companies that do invest in that and do it well they're successful companies and they reap the rewards down the line.
Well, so let's delve into that a bit deeper. So a bit of a going on the general sweeping statements, such as naming all retailers Dave. I suppose it could be argued that most companies want to get both a great customer service experience and a great employee experience. But which would you prioritize, and why and where would you start?
I mean, I think one leads to the other. I think employee experience, you mentioned the chicken and the egg. Employee experience comes first. It drives the customer experience. And I think a lot of businesses, and particularly maybe some retailers, that turnover's been quite fast lately, as I say, in the last few years.
Mm.
And so they almost treat recruitment and onboarding as, oh, I've got to do this again, and I've got to keep doing this again. And they don't realize how important it is. In that if you spend the time in the onboarding phase talking to them about more than, here's the layout of the store, here's the products we sell, and here's how you put it through the system and take the cash. They do more than that, then they can win. I think a lot of big businesses often think that employee experience is, discounted gym memberships or, a new uniform every year or something like that. And it's not. It's about investing in that individual, giving them an experience when they're working with you that allows them to grow as an individual. And for the very best retailers, and I've seen this done badly and I've seen it done very well, is provide that career path for someone to grow. Because the young people getting their first entry job in retail today are the heads of retail, heads of marketing, executives, finance leads of tomorrow. So grow your people.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, because again, you're right. The stereotypically, and I suppose in the retailers that we talk about, you often see, like you say, the new younger faces in there working at those maybe part-time jobs whilst they're going through college or something like that. And you're right, they could absolutely work their way up through the company. So having that great positive experience as a young person starting their career, in effect, could see them on a completely different path depending on how much you invest in their, as you say, in their onboarding. So that's really interesting. Looking at some of the, you mentioned about like just by a few, focusing on a few key skills as a customer can walk through the door. In terms of soft skills in those interactions, how important are those soft skills, and how can employees better train their employees in that particular area, in your opinion?
Yeah, this is the absolute crux of this whole discussion for me. Soft skills are literally the new gold. And there's a reason why. The younger generations, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, were just possibly starting to enter the workforce, but definitely Gen Z. They're the first generations that from birth, not from 5 or from 14, the first age I used a computer, from birth, they are digital natives. They have spent their lives like this in a screen. Okay? They don't have skills of a Gen Xer like me. I might look like a baby boomer, but I'm not. I'm Gen X. And they don't have those skills. The ability to make eye contact with someone, the ability to be natural and genuine when welcoming someone or smiling at them. They don't know how to recognize kind of micro changes in people's body language and behaviors or tone of voice. And they don't have it. So we've got to teach them. And a lot of retailers have not cottoned on to the fact that their new employees need help here.
And I think, it's so multifaceted, that, isn't it? Because there's there's argument for, well, I mean, with the internet and online shopping and all those kind of things, just in those, if we're singling in on retail, so many transactions are done through a computer, so there's less of a, there feels like there's less of that need, and maybe or rather it could be argued that they might feel that there's less of that need. So many communications and interactions are done through a screen nowadays. I mean, but except that they're not. That's often the perception. There's still so much face-to-face interaction that goes on, and yet that's largely influenced by the way behaviors are done through a screen. Now, it could be Absolutely. That it could be argued that in the future, it's not an issue. By that, we're using our knowledge of the way things used to be and the way we grew up, and maybe that's not as needed in the future. I don't know. It remains to be seen, I suppose. So it's interesting to see that. I mean, bringing up eye contact there, I've often, I do a piece to camera at the beginning of this podcast, and I address the camera rather than when I speak to people on the other end. But mainly because, and it's a weird one, that I could do the whole thing by looking into the camera, and I think nowadays we're almost in tune to that. If I spent the whole episode looking into the camera, I think that would freak a few people out, because we're so used to watching back recordings and being on Zoom and Teams and whatever else you might be connecting on virtually, where you're looking at the screen, at the person, and so there's almost a sense of familiarity with that. There isn't necessarily the familiarity if I was to spend the entire time look, and it's a weirdly unnerving thing. So it just shows those conditions in which you are placed almost then influences the way that you should present. For example, in a face-to-face environment where you're trying to buy either a phone or sell rather a phone or a computer or a washing machine or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
So
particularly
yes,
with a more consultative sale. It becomes massive. It becomes really, really vital, because people buy from people who they like.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the ability to build rapport with someone quickly
Absolutely.
and make them feel comfortable, then you're going to have a tough time making that sale. And it's something that our children need to be taught. I've got a 9-year-old son who is Gen Alpha. And he's an outgoing little thing. He's like me. He's not short of a few words. He can talk great. Okay. And I consistently, when we're out from time to time, if I see him, doing some things that are not particularly great, I'll pull him on it. And I'll give you a quick example. He goes to a rugby team on a Sunday morning. Fantastically coached. Every group of kids, 25 to 30, is about 7 coaches, and they're great. And there's a lot of kids there. And one of them the other day came past and really breezily, "Morning, Elijah." And he was just walking along, and he goes, "Hi, morning." And she walked on past, and I said, "You didn't say hello there." And he went, "I did. I said hello." I went, "You certainly did not." And then I had to explain to him and teach him that, it wouldn't have taken anything for him to turn, smile, and then say hello or good morning back, to whoever it was that greeted him. And that training doesn't take a lot, but the younger generation needs it. And like I say, tie that back into anything, above grocery, I would say, where the sale is often, it needs a conversation, and that can be fashion, it can be appliances, it can be telecoms, and buying £1,000 mobile phone, you absolutely need that discussion. So there's a lot,
and higher up the chain as well. I mean, there'll be not just at the sort of front line, if you will, of retail, where it's in a shop or talking from business to customer, but also higher up and in any organization where a sale is a thing. You're absolutely right. There's so much that the rapport, the sort of conversational skills, the the empathy skills, there's so many things that can be focused in on and developed within people that if it's maybe lacking, and I think there's a certain amount of leadership there to notice that might be lacking. So there's in fact, that leads me quite neatly onto my next question. So from your point of view, where does leadership play in the success of talent development programs? So especially with the generational challenges, of what we've just been talking about, how can leaders then be better equipped to support these initiatives?
It's, again, a real gap sometimes, in that often the operator of the business, or someone who has got sales against their name, will care about the ability of their employees and their ability to convert and their ability to make the sale.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I say about leaders, and what I love when I come across my network on LinkedIn, is those who post when they're being visible.
Mm-hmm.
They're out and about, they're meeting their people, they're meeting their customers, they're, old corny cliche, but they're walking a mile in their shoes. That's brilliant. But often the responsibility for training and hiring sits with HR.
Mm-hmm.
How many HR leaders go out and about into stores and look at how well their employees are treating their customers? There can often be a disconnect there, a gap. So I think it's incumbent on leadership to be visible all of the time, but make sure that is all of them, and make sure they collaborate well enough to understand what each person needs. That what the sales or the operations person needs from HR is to care about and deliver employee experience and training programs that deliver great retail salespeople that can convert and can make the sale. So go talk to each other. But often we know what that's like in big organizations. There can be a lot of silos and things like that. So it's a big challenge, but one that the best leaders do overcome.
And that's interesting. You pick up on that. So to draw in a bit about impact and our sort of take on leadership being it sometimes often to be thought about more there is a special type of action rather than a special type of person and therefore it can come from anywhere. So wouldn't it be great almost to create that culture within the organization where people right at the front line of it say, could notice themselves and pick up on actually, I've noticed something here that maybe that this might have worked better to make that sale next time, and be able to kind of pick up on their own experiences. And that can be done day to day in everyday store life. And I think that would be almost like a particular area to look at, and creating that culture whereby there's that allowing for feedback as a constructive thing, not as and looking at ways to improve to get those results, and not necessarily picking up on. So yeah, I think it's fascinating there that there's obviously parallels in what you talked about there in terms of looking at HR and looking at where that, and HR love we speak with a lot of HR professionals in this through our line of work, but also in this particular podcast, and they're desperate to get a seat at the table with certain things. So it's a great call out for sure.
I've got a classic example. One of the things that I do, my industry is telecoms retail, but my company sells software and services all around the globe. And some of that software is SaaS, software as a service. And there are billion-dollar companies out there, hundreds, thousands of them, that sell software as a service. And there's a fleet of companies that have grown to support these businesses. And what they do is they analyze your sales interactions. Because a lot of sales interactions now are across Teams or Zoom or something like that. What you can do is you can switch this widget on as you're having your sales calls. And what will happen is that call will get analyzed.
Right.
And your performance is consistently being fed back to you. So in a conversation with a client, what percentage of time did you speak? What percentage of time did they speak? Did you mention X, Y, Z, A, B, C? And so on. And so some industries are baking that in to their world. Retailers, however, are not. And there's a specific event that happened about 10, 15 years ago, and it was the rise of NPS. The rise of NPS resulted in the death of mystery shopping. There was a simple reason why. Mystery shopping was often very expensive to get an opinion. You're employing real people to go out there and give you a structured feedback as to what your experience is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And you could build a culture around that feedback. All of a sudden, with SMS and web links and however, it became very quickly just to capture somebody's data, shoot them a quick NPS survey, and that then replaced the mystery shopping. But actually,
Right.
it hasn't. A lot of the NPS surveys I see out there are false. Absolutely false, just because of the methodology and how they're capturing that.
Mm.
I work with a lot of telecoms companies around the world. And one of the things that I do is I ask them, I implore them to balance their NPS collection with a semblance of good old-fashioned mystery shopping.
Mm.
Because then you get a really independent view of, here is that experience. And that's another piece that I think a lot of the executives could and should look at in retail to deliver what they need to deliver.
Mm. It's fascinating, and again, it all comes back to that. You're right. About the soft skills being such a pivotal point and such a crux question of this whole conversation. And there's so many things you've been talking about there. There's so many things that have come to my mind of so many decisions and things that happen and interactions that happen are so in the moment and on the fly and can be totally changed and adapted to the moment that you're in. And it's like even something like empathy, just observing the way that you walked through the door on that day with the DisplayPort cable. If there had been a more present, if there'd have been the empathy skills there in the team members that you interacted with, they'd have been able to sense your rush. Then they'd been able to go, there might be something going on. I mean, so there's already from your perspective, there's a heightened sense of, I'm just here to get this done. I need that help, blah, blah, blah. And just being able to, and so many things go on for so many people in our daily lives that just aren't communicated out verbally. It's just as you were talking there about, the mystery shoppers, it made me think, I've been a mystery shopper once, and I wonder how I came across. I remember doing it through university and being able to go out for a free pizza or something. It was a great way of feeding myself through uni. But it's, and I kind of, now that I look back on that, I kind of think, how did I behave as a customer? How did I act different than I would have done had I been a full paying guest? It's interesting looking at that aspect, and I remember again as a retailer, you kind of working in those retail environments. If you knew there was going to be mystery shopper coming in that day, you would change the way you behaved. So I wonder what is it's interesting that kind of finding that balance of what works best. But ultimately, I think what you were saying earlier about focusing in on that employee experience to then have a knock-on effect to the customer is well. Let's see. Like, if you were to pick up a final top tip about of everything that we might have talked about today, what would be that one thing that you can think of that would help, or that you might start to do, or you might advise that somebody start to do to improve that employee and or customer experience?
Sure. I think the thing with training is it's often not one and done. It's something that you have to kind of practice and over a long
Mm,
period of time. So the one thing that I would urge every retail business on the planet to do is once a quarter. So, not once a week, not once a month, maybe with newer people, fine, but once a quarter, once every 3 months, do some observations
hmm
on each staff member, how they're interacting with people, how they seem. And yes, it's a snapshot, but take that snapshot and then have a conversation about it. What was good? What could have been better? How are they living and displaying your brand values? How are they performing for that customer? And all of those behaviors, micro or bigger,
hmm
how are they impacting on your ability to be successful? And I think if the best businesses can instill that as a culture, so that the store managers can do it on their staff, so that the regional managers can do it as well inside stores, so that when the head of retail comes and visits stores, or the HR lead, they're all um, embodying these behaviors,
mm.
then you're going to have a chance at getting it throughout your organization.
That's a really nice way of putting it, and I think that almost that's a great starting point of looking at that once a quarter. And I think it would be great to almost have that as continuous. I think I mentioned it earlier on that continuous. But you'd have to create that culture where that's okay, because, and I think even with what you've said there is that they're doing it once a quarter. If I was in that position of I knew I was being observed once a quarter, then yeah, like how would my behavior be different on that day, or would I feel like I was being watched, or would I
Mm.
feel like but it's not, that's not what it's about, that's not what it's for. You
No,
need to, it's being crucial that culture is there to improve things. It's there to be a safe space for everyone to kind of feel
yeah.
that they can be themselves whilst also providing a great customer service for anybody that walks in the door.
And if you build that into your world as well, there's ways in which an observation doesn't have to sound so, Big Brother is watching you.
Yeah.
Uh, if you train, again, it comes back down to training, right? If you train your store managers to
Mm,
be consistently observing and consistently just making little notes about what was great, what was not so great, because it's not always about catching people who are maybe having an off day or what have you. Catch people doing some things that are great.
mm.
But if your culture is, I want to always be on the lookout to either recognize or coach, you're going to have a good culture and you're going to have a chance for success.
That's it. Well, that's been absolutely brilliant. Thank you for that conversation.
Oh, thanks. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it goes quick, doesn't it? But I do have one final question before I do let you go, which is a bit more of a personal question. So
Yeah.
it's the one we ask all of our guests, which is, if you were to start your career again, knowing what you know now, what would be the best piece of advice you'd give your younger self?
Only one.
That's up to
Um,
you. I'll leave that for you.
I can think of about 17.
All right,
And
maybe not that many.
maybe a few people who've worked with me in the past might also say, right, okay, I think 5 or 6 that I could have tell the Will of old. I think the main thing, particularly as we move through the 2020s and beyond into the AI age, is focus.
Mhm.
I am a particular type of person. I think that probably comes through over this recording. I'm driven. I can be outgoing. I can be fast. I'm a mile a minute. I'm a machine. I can be very productive and get lots and lots of things done.
Mm,
But focus on what is massively important and do that and just do that until you're ready to focus on something else. I think that is something that I think I'll certainly be teaching my children. I'm
mhm,
trying to teach myself to be better at it every day. But I think definitely the young generations as they're coming through are going to need that as well, because
mm,
everything is so fast now with AI and always on and screens everywhere and so on, that you can just become all over the place if you're not careful. So focus.
I think that's a really good one, and certainly something I can do with developing as well, because my focus can lack so from time to time. And you're absolutely right. The conditions we have around us really makes that hard these days. I think fast paced, as you say, access to the world of knowledge in your pocket, the screens everywhere, and so the focus, not to mention the kind of social pressures that seem to be heightened these days. So loads of it's a really nice way to end today's conversation. So thank you once again, Will, for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. So thank you, Will, for joining me today. And if you'd like to find out, first of all, if you'd like to read Will's blog, then we'll make sure that the link is to that in the description of where you found today's episodes, as well the links to our LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with either of us on LinkedIn, then please do so. Plus, of course, if you want to find out more about Impact, again, you'll find all of those links in the description of where you found today's episodes. So thank you once more to Will Gibson for joining me today. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
And until the next time, take care.